Hello, everyone. This is Gustavo, Environmental Investigations Editor of the Pulitzer Center. I'm seeing the participants joining. We'll give 30 seconds to make sure that everybody will be here before we start, but welcome. Just for get things going, I'll ask you to use the chat to introduce yourself. Well, luckily or unfortunately, we have so many participants that we cannot open the mics and cameras for each one of you to introduce yourselves, which we would love. But I think the best way of doing this is asking you to start using the chat just to say your name and where you're speaking from. But first of all, happy World Ocean Day. As you know, today is a very special day, and that's why we decided to do this event. To formally launch our new initiative on ocean. The Pulitzer Center has been working with several environmental issues, including oceans, but this is a new moment for us because we're launching the Ocean Reporting Network, a community of journalists that will receive financial support, editorial support to start working with in-depth stories on ocean. And here with me today, I have Jessica Aldred, my colleague, who just a few weeks ago joined the Pulitzer Center as our senior editor for Ocean. Welcome, Jessica. Hello. Also want to thank our colleague, Fernanda Bufa, who is helping us here in the backstage, the coordinator of our environmental unit. As I told you, I'm the Environmental Investigations Editor for the Pulitzer Center. I work both on the initiative of ocean and rainforests. We started years ago with the Rainforest Initiative, which is very similar to what we do with ocean. We do grants and fellowships for journalists in the Amazon, Congo Basin, and Southeast Asia who are interested to do in-depth stories about rainforests. And that's, as I was saying, this is what we're trying to do with the Ocean Reporting Network, expand our topics and give the opportunity for those who are covering this issue to have the support. I believe a lot of you know about the Pulitzer Center, but just a few words. The Pulitzer Center, it's a nonprofit created in 2006 for supporting journalists, either from staff or from our freelancers all around the world, to do very ambitious projects for allowing them to do in-depth stories, investigations, and since then we have supported hundreds of projects. Every year we support around 200 projects all over on topics, as I said, like rainforests, ocean, but also peace and conflict, health issues. So actually, there's opportunities all over the year for you to go to the website and apply. But we are here today to talk about ocean, and I'll start inviting Jessica to give us an overview of the importance of this issue and why we decided to work with it. She will give some of the key topics that we are exploring with this opportunity, and after that I'll do a brief presentation also how the Ocean Reporting Network, the fellowship opportunity, is going to work, and we'll have time for questions. We'll be using the Q&A function of this webinar for collecting questions, and we'll share our contacts by the end of it as well. So Jessica, welcome again, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Gustavo. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. Just give me 1 sec while I get my screen set up for the presentation. Okay. Just 1 sec, sorry. Hang on, let me try again. Oh, I got it. Right, here we go. Sorry. Just bear with me one sec. Sorry, I've had a bit of a problem with the slides. Hang on.
I'm reading the chat here. Thanks for sharing. Amazing group. Do you want? Yeah.
Can you see that now? No.
No.
Okay.
Do you want me to share them?
Yeah. Sorry.
No worries. Let me just put on the right one, and then I'll start here. Okay. Now I'm seeing yours.
Okay. I just need to get the thing where I can have the notes. Sorry. Oh, I'll just try and do it without the notes.
Let me
see how I go. Yes. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Sorry about that. Slides are not my forte. So happy World Ocean Day. And yeah, it's a great opportunity to be able to talk to you about this new opportunity, which I think is really exciting and will really help expand capacity to be able to report on ocean issues. Okay, just briefly about me. As Gustavo said, this is only my second week at the Pulitzer Center. So I'm still finding my way around the intricacies of the reporting networks, which he will talk a bit more about later. Before the Pulitzer Center, I was the editor of China Dialogue Ocean for a bit more than 4 years. So I did a combination of writing, commissioning and editing there. And I also really expanded our capacity to be able to report on ocean issues around the world. So we've recruited a really good team of people in West Africa. We already had existing editorial capacity in Latin America and Southeast Asia. And for those of you who don't know about China Dialogue, it's really sort of intended to foster a dialogue, so try to understand issues from the China perspective and report about issues from China about China, but also examine China's kind of role in the global ocean, which is really big and led to a lot of really interesting stories. Before that, I was at The Guardian for quite a long time. So I started off creating the first iteration of the website and sticking with it as it grew through its various expansions. I was sort of thinking about, like, people often ask me, why did you get into ocean reporting? And at The Guardian, there was obviously a lot of senior, very experienced reporters, and I was very low in the pecking order. So I kind of was able to report on the stories that nobody else was really interested in. And so a lot of them ended up being ocean stories. But I've kind of got a lifelong interest in wildlife and conservation. And I grew up in a house where my parents were basically hippies. So as a child, I went on Greenpeace protests and had Save the Whale posters all over my bedroom. So it's a lifelong passion. And I've just sent my children to school today with stickers for World Ocean Day so that they can help to spread the word as well. So please do get in touch if you have any questions. I've put all my contact details there. So most of you probably already know this, but I went to an event at the House of Commons last night, and it's just always useful to remind ourselves how important the ocean is, just in terms of regulating the climate and weather. Every second breath, or 50% of the oxygen that we breathe, comes from the ocean. And also importantly, just as a source of food for people around the world, and the jobs that creates, not only in fisheries and aquaculture, but also tourism as well. So it's the biggest carbon sink. It's hugely important, but it has been sort of neglected in terms of policy and reporting, which I'll come on to shortly. So I had a long list here of all of the things that I was going to talk about here in my notes, so that I didn't have too many words on my slides. But yeah, climate impacts, it's warming, and that's leading to acidification and deoxygenation. It's causing huge die-offs. We're seeing increased marine heat waves, changes in things like the Gulf Stream and the Southern Ocean Oscillation, and that's only going to continue. Overfishing and illegal fishing, You know, as we've had mass industrialization and advances in technology, we've seen the ability of greater catches. We're also having emerging middle classes in lots of countries that were lower income, and that's leading to increased demand for seafood. Also, globalization and trade and technology is allowing fish to be exported and processed and moved around the world far faster than they ever were before. Pollution is, you know, not only the plastic pollution issue that we know a lot about, but chemical pollution and ghost gear from fishing. They're really big issues, and biodiversity loss, which is connected to all three of those. And then we're seeing increasingly more pressure on the ocean from activities like deep sea mining, the expansion of renewables, shipping, tourism, aquaculture, and geoengineering. And at the same time, the ocean is really underprotected. So you can see from here, less than 8% is protected, and an even smaller amount is fully protected, which means that there's no activity at all. And something that I'll talk about later on, there's a goal to increase that to 30% by 2030. But we really need to move the dial on that. So I think for me, the dial has really shifted on ocean issues and awareness since, I think it was 2018 or 19, when the Blue Planet BBC documentary had David Attenborough with, I think this is actually the picture of the turtle in the fishing net, but I think it was eating a plastic bag. And all of a sudden, you know, you saw this huge sort of shift in awareness and behavioral change around plastics. And I think for many people that became a gateway into wider ocean issues and marine conservation, and they learned about the other pressures that were on the ocean. I think there's been more coverage of big ocean stories in major newspapers. So when the High Seas Treaty was agreed, or the Convention on Biological Diversity, and a lot of the coverage around deep sea mining means that, you know, there's civil society raising awareness, journalists are reporting on it, it's becoming more mainstream, and they're able to put pressure on lawmakers and scrutiny in those processes as well. So I do think there is a lot more attention. And also, I think there's been huge tech advances, organizations like Global Fishing Watch and Ocean Mind, and the work they've done with satellite technology, and a lot of the new innovations around DNA barcoding that's making seafood and fish more traceable throughout the supply chain. I think those three things have really shifted for me in the past few years. There's been a lot of things to celebrate in the ocean world in the past few years. So last year, I think, again, I had all of these on my notes, so forgive me if I get the dates wrong, but let's just say these all happened in the past year or so. And I think many of these did get delayed by COVID as well. So there's been a kind of raft of things that have been agreed that have showed real progress. So the High Seas Treaty, that was being negotiated over a period of about 20 years, and that now protects 2/3 of the global ocean, which is sort of outside the territorial waters of countries and belongs to no one nation, but everyone. It's for the common heritage of mankind. And that it was sort of key to the signing of the CBD in Montreal at the end of last year. And key to that target is a commitment to protect 30% of land and sea by 2030, which is a really ambitious target. Also, last year was the World Trade Organization finally concluded their negotiations on harmful fishing subsidies. That was, again, a 20-year process. And that basically means that any subsidies that, so public money that goes towards supporting overfishing or illegal fishing will be ended. I would say with a lot of these, it's great that they've been signed, but they're yet to be ratified. So that's something that I think we can continue to report on, and scrutiny and civil society needs to keep the focus on that. I've also seen in the past year or two that there's been a lot of talk about this ocean climate nexus. And I think that really started from the Glasgow COP at the end of 2020, I think, where the ocean was brought into the UNFCCC framework for the first time. So it means that ocean action will be counted towards like countries' nationally determined contributions. And the ocean is being seen as a key part of tackling climate change, whereas before they were two separate, very siloed processes. The Plastics Treaty is another really big breakthrough. In Nairobi last year, they signed the deal to commit to negotiating a deal that will stop plastic throughout the entire life cycle. They've just had the second negotiating session on that in Paris, and I think the next one is down for next year. And I've also seen that there's a lot more high-level political will. So In the US, John Kerry is a huge ocean champion and has been for a long time. And once a year, he convenes a high-level conference called Our Ocean, which is really important. And he's got Biden moving on a lot of ocean action as well. And I think Macron in France has been very vocal about deep sea mining. He convened a high-level summit in Brest last year, and he's pushing on a lot of ocean issues. So I think we are seeing more political will. And civil societies had a huge role to play. They've been present at all the talks about deep sea mining and the high seas, and they've really kept the negotiators on track and worked as kind of communicators in keeping the public informed about what's going on. And organizations like Greenpeace as well and the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition have been really working to raise awareness of deep sea mining, which is becoming a huge sort of touchstone issue. So a lot of people are now aware that it's actually potentially happening, and there's a lot more protest and opposition. At the UN Ocean Conference last year in Lisbon, there was a deep sea mining event, and Sylvia Earle was speaking, and some of the Pacific Island countries were announcing that they were doing a coalition to oppose it, and the queues were going out of the door, and it was by far the most heated and vocal session of any of the side events that I saw. So I think that's something which will keep the focus on that very controversial issue. So here's a lovely picture I've put of myself and a colleague, Fermine Coop, interviewing Elizabeth Moreira, who's the CBD chair in Lisbon last year. So we need more reporters who know about the ocean, but there are huge challenges in trying to build up that capacity, and that's what I think this initiative with the fellowships and the individual story grants and working in collaboration will really do. It's underreported, it's overlooked within newsrooms. They tend to focus on bigger climate stories. There's a lack of money. Many newsrooms, they're lucky if they have a dedicated environmental reporter, let alone an ocean reporter. And often people are kind of put onto that beat or story when it's not really their expertise. It's very opaque. A lot of the regulation and the frameworks are quite complicated and hard to get your head around. And I know, I'd done wildlife and conservation stories about marine issues, but I know when I started trying to understand some of the language and terminology and how all of the governance was connected was a really big challenge. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And, a common thing that civil society likes to say is when they were talking about the high seas, it's out of sight, it's out of mind. For a lot of us, it's hard to relate to. And as I said, it's very complex. That's just some of the kind of jargon soup that you will come across when reporting on ocean issues. So well done to anybody if you can decipher all of that really quickly. And it's also trying to make it relevant to everyday readers. There's so many competing stories and pressures and, cost of living, Ukraine. There's a lot more stuff that is considered more newsworthy. So we need to work really hard to try to get these stories onto pages or onto radio or television or whichever platform. Often I found as well, you'll have really good reporters with very good hyper-local stories, but they also often struggle to make that connection to sort of how is this relevant to a global audience, or, what are the dots that you need to connect to really bring that story to life. And just from my experience of working at China Dialogue Ocean as well, I think making it really fair and balanced. Some of the reporting I've seen about distant water fleets and China's in particular is really it's really unfair, and it's not just the Chinese vessels doing that, and I think that's something that needs to be worked on as well. So I just sort of thought about what some of the good ingredients are for a story on ocean, and I think to start with, it has to have that human connection, whether it's lives that are being impacted or what it means for you on a daily basis. And I think they're the stories that will kind of, make the pages. As I said already, like connecting local issues to a wider regional and global stage is really important. If you're reporting on something in your country, you have to think about how that's going to play out. And issues that are new from a region, and by this I mean the example of Sierra Leone's sinking island. So I was really aware, and many of us are, that there's, this small island Pacific states kind of tend to dominate stories about that, but I had no idea that, there was a whole chains of islands off West Africa that were about to disappear underwater. And we sent one of our reporters off with a camera, and he came back with some fantastic photos and videos. And I think often there's an issue that many people might be aware of, but maybe not from a particular region. So that's something to consider. Things that are really in depth as well. So I've put a link to the Catch podcast, which I just thought was so fascinating. They traced squid from where it was being caught in Peru all the way through the supply chain to where it was eventually being consumed. And I think it was 40-minute episodes that really went in depth and gave fantastic color and life to the story. The other in-depth thing as well, which I really would shout out, is Todd Woody's work about deep sea mining. So he was one of our freelancers at China Dialogue Ocean, and he unfortunately then got a job with Bloomberg, but he's doing some really great reporting, and he did a really deep dive into the International Seabed Authority, which is the body that regulates eventual deep sea mining, and how that close they were to industry. So I would recommend looking at that. And also the Palau Marine Sanctuary story. This started off as just a piece of news that I think I saw on maybe Pew's website about Palau creating this huge MPA. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's do some photos. And it turned out that, sorry, I have a jumping spider on my keyboard. It turned out that it actually wasn't being protected at all. They were allowing foreign vessels to fish in the waters, and all of the local fishermen were losing livelihoods. And then it turned into a saga that was playing out in national elections. So it started as off as a quite small story, but went incredibly in depth into a much wider issue. So yeah, any impacts on humans or ecosystems, but also I just think there's really good science stories that, you know, deserve way more coverage than they get. So an example I've given is cold fish, which was this idea that fish can act as a carbon sink as well. If you keep fisheries healthy and you protect them, then they can absorb the carbon as well, and they can act as another climate regulator. And a fantastic story I did about whale poo, which was it was basically about how whales play a vital role in the ocean by kind of, you know, taking this carbon to the bottom when they sink and die, but also their poo fertilizes the ocean. And it turned into one of the most read stories that we'd had. So things like that really capture imagination are really interesting. Just a couple of topics. I think a lot of questions about the fellowship have been, well, are you looking for a specific topic? No, I think the three big ones that you know are at the top of the food chain, as well as biodiversity loss, is climate, pollution and fishing. But within that, there's so many other stories, and you know, conservation, the kind of the implementation of marine protected areas, any kind of initiatives, blue economy. There's a whole thing about finance there and sort of managing the ocean sustainably and balancing that with the needs of what we want to extract and use the ocean for. Blue carbon, you know, how do you value those systems? There's whole controversy around offsets and credits that applies to ocean carbon as well. Finance, has a lot of interesting stuff around risk and insurance. Also the funding that goes into ocean protection and research. Governance and law, and how you kind of you account for that. Geoengineering as well. So there's lots of talk about using the ocean as a kind of solution by seeding it with iron fertilizer or getting it to absorb more, but none of the science of that has been tested yet, and they want to do it at massive scale. So what are the implications of that? Technologies, I said, all the kind of interesting fishing stuff. And then I think, you know, we do lots of stories about overfishing and illegal fishing, but, you know, there's a whole stuff around port state measures and subsidies and technology and aquaculture, and, you know, how is that going to grow sustainably? And shipping, which I just think is such a fascinating industry in terms of how it intersects with the ocean, and green shipping corridors, and how you sort of transition towards alternative fuels. So I had whole reams of notes about that, but, you know, I'm happy to talk about any of those ideas further. And I just put some dates on here. So I sort of do this at the start of every year, and it gives me an idea of, you know, what do we want to go and cover? What are the key awareness days? You know, which reporters do we want to line up to attend things? So we've got shipping, deep sea mining, Antarctic protection, and the climate COP at the end of this year. And then next year, the Economist Ocean Summit is always a really good one for bringing together business with ocean. The UN Decade of Ocean Science, plastic pollution, whaling, Our Ocean, which, as I said, is the John Kerry initiative, and then more on fisheries from the FAO. So lots of dates for your diaries, and we're going to send out the slides at the end of those. So please do save those if they're helpful. And just to shout out that we've also launched an ocean reporting toolkit, which is data, information sources, places to look for information, anything that you need to help you get started. So have a look at that as well. So that's everything from me. Sorry again about the misfiring with the Google slides, and I'm glad I managed to remember most of what I wanted to say. So I'll hand over to Gustavo now.
Great, thank you, Jessica. It was great. Help me just passing on the slides, so the next one. So I'll give you the details about the Ocean Reporting Network. This is the fellowships, as I was saying, and also gonna, by the end of this short presentation, talking about the other aspect of this opportunity, which are grants that are always open throughout this year. Next one, please. So what is the Ocean Reporting Network? These are the global fellowships for cross-border collaborative in-depth reporting on ocean issues. Basically, we are gonna grant fellowships very soon. So the applications are open, as you know. And these are similar to the program that we've been doing with the Rainforest Investigations Network. There are some differences in kind of the scope of the story. We're looking not only investigations, but also features and in-depth reporting. But we tend to say that we see a lot of potential on the collaboration behind this community and the potential of cross-border investigations and stories. Next one, please. So what kind of stories do we expect? You've seen the main topics. That's why we planned for this introduction from Jessica, for you to get an inspiration and get a sense of what are the major stories out there. So I think you should keep those key topics. I like what you said, Jessica, about the topics that are in the top of the food chain as a kind of a guideline of what the kind of stories we're expecting, but in a more like journalistic lenses here, we're looking for in-depth stories connecting these local trends. It can be a local story, but always looking at how this is important in a global perspective. After all, ocean is a global issue. So we tend to favor stories that are looking at supply chains or making these connections between the impacts on a local community or a local ecosystem with the global issue. It could be climate change, or, as I said, like supply chains. I will say this again, we're not looking for strictly investigative stories in a sense that you have to review something that is totally new. Of course, we respect breakthroughs in the stories, but these stories can be more in-depth. It can be a feature stories. And the reason for that is that we feel there is a gap in ocean reporting that we can help with this opportunity. So we are opening a little bit more the let's say, the scope. Nevertheless, we also expect that this stories, this in-depth and investigations, they are based, evidence-based, and they work with data. And they also have, when you're submitting, you have some kind of a pre-reporting effort to identify who's going to be your sources, what kind of documents you're going to work with, what kind of data sets you can use. So when you are applying, please consider telling us how's your reporting plan, how are you going to bring this layer of evidence to your story, because this is important for us to make sense to have a fellowship for an entire year. That's how we've been working. And I'm going to talk very soon about our data team and data and research team and how we're going to work together with them. This is another aspect of the things that we've been doing with the Pulitzer Center, with all kind of reporting communities that we are creating. We are looking at ambitious project in a sense that you want to really reach your audiences. It can be the audience of your outlets, but thinking a little bit out of the box in terms of how the audiences that are impacted by the issues that we are talking about can be also reached. So we are favoring innovative and collaborative approaches. If you're proposing something that has different aspects of distribution, that tends to be a good proposal for us. And I'm saying about, like different formats. I'm talking about ideas as I said, to reach these local audiences or the audience that are being directly impacted by the issue that you're covering. So think a little bit out of the box. It's very important, when you're submitting to us, for us to describe to describe for us who are the professionals that are be contributing to your story or investigation, what other outlets can contribute. There is a need for you to describe the distribution strategy of your project. Like who be going to be the professionals and outlets that are going to be working with you. Next. Over the years, we've been funding, and most recently, stories about the ocean. Just a few examples that are in line with what Jessica just mentioned. Like we've been funding, like there's a story of CNN about biodiversity, the impact on whales. We've been also supporting stories about fisheries, like this one about AP, showing like the problems, the gaps of legislation to regulate fisheries. We also have been seeing demand for, like better coverage on deep sea mining. So I'm just showing that you're already, like looking at these issues and supporting projects, but we want more of those. We want more ambitious projects, more long-term. We always say in this group that we have the environmental unit of the Pulitzer Center, that some of the environmental stories, they're never one-off, like they're always like longer term. So for us, it's very important to create these opportunities to guarantee that, like we'll keep the coverage coming, and also looking how these ecosystems, these environments are changing over time. So these are examples of good stories that we funded, but doesn't mean that we cannot get more of those, because the stories are unfolding. I'm seeing questions are coming. Please keep using the Q&A for sending the questions. We'll have time for answering them and getting more. Next one, Jessica, please. So how is this network gonna work? Overall, what we provide are the funds for your stories over a year. There's also this data and research team that I just mentioned that I'm seeing my colleague Aldred is here also in the audience. And we have a data editor, Quaxer Kang, works with us. So this team that is also expanding, we're going to bring more people to work with you. They work really closely to the fellows to, like to advise on tools, digital tools, or ways of finding data that are not easy to find, to, liaison with your outlet, the data analyst that you might have in your project and outlet to, discuss the best ways of creating a data visualization or making a data analysis. The editorial support here that I'm putting doesn't mean that we're going to interfere on the policies, the editorial policies of your outlet or the outlet you're working on. That we can guarantee. You have total editorial independence. We're not going to say like when your story needs to publish or the format. We advise, we want to help. My work and Jessica's work as editors of these initiatives, of these networks, is really trying to connect the dots and say, like, why not collaborating with this other fellow? Why not publishing your stories here and there? Because it might get more attention and more impact. So, or anytime you also ask for our advice and help, we are here for that. We don't tend to do like line editing, like getting our stories and editing everything. This is the role of your editors in your outlets. But if you want, we can read at your story and advise on the best angles and best structures. That's how we working with this reporting communities. Next one, please. So some practical information. This is the first cohort of the Ocean Reporting Network. Just to compare, we've been doing the Rainforest Investigations Network for 3 years. There's an opportunity when we go for a second or third year to fellows to renew. We have this experience on the Rainforest Investigations Network, so we kind of mirroring the model here. But this is the first cohort. We're expecting to receive applications until June 18. And if everything goes well, by mid-July, we'll be onboarding 8 fellows. That's the goal, to have 8 fellows in this first year. We again, from the experience we have with the Rainforest Network, there is a chance that we can, like have some creative arrangements and have one more fellow, maybe one less, depends on the proposal we receive. But the goal is to have at least 8. Differently from the Rainforest Initiative, we are not creating prioritial regions like the Congo Basin, the Amazon, or Southeast Asia. And that's for obvious reasons, because the ocean is a global issue. We've been seeing a lot of dynamics, like between global North and global South in these issues. So we believe that the collaborations of journalists all over will be key for us to do a good work. So all of you are welcome to submit. Next one. So what is included in the fellowship? For 1 year, we're going to pay your salary based on the rate that is paid for the outlet and the region. So a lot of people send us questions like, "Oh, what's the amount of the fellowship?" We tend to decide this, like discussing with you and your editor if your proposal is approved. Of course, there's a limit for us depending on the region, depending on the salary of the outlet. We'll try to negotiate directly with your editor, like a rate that is possible within our budget. But from what we've been seeing, what we budget, it's pretty, generous, and it covers usually what is paid for a salary in the region that you are working. So it's been working with other initiatives. If you have more questions about that, let me know. The other thing that is included is the coordination of our team of editors that I just mentioned, the work that Jessica will be doing with fellows by advising the best angles and possibilities of collaboration, and the data and research team that will work directly with you. There's a lot of, I forgot to put it specifically, an opportunity here. There's a lot of training involved. We tend to do in the first month's trainings almost every week. Depending on your skills, you won't be required to attend all of those, but what we see is like people really want to participate because they're trainings on how to do geospatial analysis, how to increase your like your spreadsheet skills, how to find satellite imagery, how to do visual investigations, and so on and so on. There's also, like, we bring guests to talk about one specific investigation that can be very inspiring. So there's lots of opportunities for training as well. Again, you and your outlet have editorial control. We'll be advising and providing capacity, but not interfering on the workflow of your outlet. And finally, there are reporting expenses that are also covered. So you have up to $10,000 US for expenses such as trips, or like if you want to hire like a cameraman. We saw a lot of people hiring lawyers to do requests of information or working on a specific topics, experts that are useful for some, like technical issue in your project are also covered by these funds. But we kind of control like the flow of these funds. We will ask you to, like the receipts and how you're going to reimburse this cost, but that's apart from your salary, you have this reporting expenses fund. Next one.
I think that's the last one. Oops,
Oh, no.
no, sorry.
There's one before that, which is,
there we go.
Yeah, because this is a question that we already got in the Q&A, and I want to respond. Like, how often should the stories be published in broadcast, and in which formats? Here we go. We don't have a goal of stories that you should publish during this year. It's, as I said, like, you have the editorial independence to decide the format and how often you're going to publish. What we advise is to, as this should be very ambitious, in-depth projects, is to plan for a series or to plan for a big story and find opportunities to plant seeds for this big story throughout the year. Sometimes there are issues related to that beat that you can cover during the year, and by the end of the period of investigation or of production, you will be publishing a bigger feature story. So it is up to you and your editors to decide. We're certainly going to discuss that, but we are open to several formats. We are not supporting, it's very unlikely that we're going to support very long-term projects that tend to go over a year, like a book project or like a super long movie, although we would welcome ideas for documentaries linked to the project, but it needs to fit within this 12 months, counting that there is like a starting period. In the end, we wouldn't like to have a stories published by the last month of the fellowship. So plan to do a project that is feasible within a year, and we'll be flexible in terms of the number of stories published and the formats. Again, important for this to be really well explained and well thought before the application. So you have to explain the distribution plan in your form, the application form. I think there's one last one that is about collaboration. It's very important to emphasize this, that we really believe on that, and we've been seeing great results. So there is the main thing to get out of this opportunity is not really the money, believe me. It's about sitting with your colleagues, meeting them sometimes in person and exchanging ideas, creating these groups and these conversations that will help you to grow a lot while doing this fellowship, exchanging ideas, exchanging data, exchanging information. And who knows, maybe there is a joint opportunity to publish. We don't oblige anyone to publish together to collaborate, but believe me, this is what you will be getting more of this fellowship. Like by collaborating, we're going to grow your project, even if you're not publishing together. So we constantly collaborating with you, proposing forms of, like growing your project, skills, trainings, opportunities to speak, and so on. And again, there's this holy grail. Who knows? You can do a joint project between fellows, looking, like different issues that happen in different countries, but they overlap. We have several examples of this. I think this is the last one. Let me see. Oh yeah, finally, just to not miss this opportunity, we wanted to use this to talk more about the fellowships, as the due date for the application is coming, but there are grants available for Stories on Oceans. If you think the fellowship is not the best format for you, consider looking at this page that's called Deep Dives. If you go to Pulitzer Center .org and go to journalism or opportunities, we'll see this page is called Deep Dives. That's where we describe the ocean and fisheries reporting initiative. And there you find also the way to apply for grants at any time of the year. So this is rolling basis. And this usually to tend like one-off story or something that you're gonna, like you need resources for doing a trip. On these grants, we usually don't cover salaries or stipends for the journalists and freelancers. We hope in these grants that the outlets will support you on that. So these are more focused on like funding one specific trip or one aspect of expertise that is needed, like video editing or a camera. So these are complementary. Like we have, again, in the rainforest, we have the Rainforest Journalist Fund that helps journalists that needs to do this trips, almost like an emergency fund. And then we have the Rainforest Investigations Network that is supporting more in depth a year-long project. And I'll finish here because I'm seeing questions and we want to respond them. And we can stay maybe 5 or 10 minutes more to make sure that we got all the questions responded. Do you see any question that you want to answer, Jessica? I'll start looking at them now.
So the first one I'll take. So this has come up quite a lot, and it's a really good question about eligibility. So when we started putting together the call for applications, I think the first draft was must have ocean plus investigative experience. And I think I said there's probably about 4 or 5 people in the world who have that. So we've sort of modified it slightly. So if you've been reporting on oceans for ages and ages, but you've never had the chance to do something more in-depth or really investigative, this is a great opportunity and you would qualify on those grounds. If you're an investigative reporter, but you've done maybe environmental stories and only ever 1 or 2 ocean stories, but you're vaguely aware of the issues, that's also enough to qualify you. But this is not for student journalists. This is like, you have to be a working journalist, and you have to be working in the environmental field. And I think, you know, there is a lot of capacity building that we will do with investigation, but often as well, stories don't lend themselves to investigation. They just may be underreported. You know, people may not be aware of them on a global scale. There might be a local story that you know, needs to be made bigger or connected up. So it's not solely limited to investigations. It's in-depth reporting as well, and that can be through, you know, print, online, radio, TV. So yeah, Gustavo, do you want to take the next one?
Yes, well, there's a question from Yusmari about palm oil in deforestation in Indonesia. So for that, we have the Rainforest Journalist Fund or the Rainforest Investigations Network. So consider applying for those. Our next question is about, as a freelancer, do I need to have a newsroom prepared to host me the full year? The answer is yes. It doesn't mean that you have to publish all your stories with them. If you have more than one or you have partnerships, we can publish with others, but we need a letter of commitment during the application process that shows that you have a newsroom willing to host you. And when the fellowship is approved, we sit down with the editors and lay down the conditions, make sure that you get all the support from the newsroom while doing this fellowship. We tend to think it's very attractive to have you know, like a year of a salary paid and reporting expenses, and plus the editorial support on our side. And so we've seen a lot of enthusiasm from several newsrooms. And on the continuation of that one is, if we prefer local or international newsrooms, not really. As long as we get this letter of support and see that there is a real commitment, we'll consider any newsroom.
There's a good question here from Jen about the balance of reporting. So are you looking for stuff that exposes failings versus more solutions oriented? I feel like the solutions oriented stuff might lend itself to an individual one-off grant. So an initiative that is going to, I don't know, restore a population of a certain species in a certain region, and how are they doing it? I think the only example I can think of is if it was a geoengineering deep dive and they were looking at, you know, how these solutions which are being proposed might sort of, you know, work on a global scale. I think it would be more sort of stuff that was systemic and or underreported. So I don't know, like, I think there is a really good, there's space for solutions journalism, but also, I don't know, like, this is like plastic is a good example. People go, oh, well, it's great, they're doing an ocean cleanup. No, that's, yes, they are, but you need to stop it at the source. So I think looking at that side of it rather than just the technology that's going to clean it up would probably be like my preference, I think.
Good one. I'm going to combine two here. One from San Lagron is asking us what is the funding for this initiative, if it's coming from the Norwegian government, and also from Olivia, there's a question if there's an expectation for a second cohort next year, and for how many years do we have funding for this program. So some, yes, this is a support from the Norwegian government, from NORAD, the aid agency of Norway. They've been our partners also for the rainforest work. So we're spending, although the rainforest work is supported by another initiative that is NICFI, the Norwegian Initiative for Climate and Forests. This is an expansion of our partnership with them by working with NORAD. And in terms of having a second cohort, we do expect to maintain this project over many years. We cannot guarantee that it's going to be how many years, but we are at this point, you know, like negotiating and looking at the opportunity to make this a permanent feature of the Pulitzer Center.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, we need to accept there is going to be a lot of capacity building. Not everyone is going to have all of the answers or the expertise, but that's about being in the network and sharing that together that will help us sort of, you know, report on these issues better. Gustavo, do you want to answer the one about the methodology, and you could maybe talk a bit about working with Keng and Yelta?
Yeah. So on the application, the methodology doesn't need to be, like if you send us very detailed, of course, we're going to be impressed and you have a good chance. But the methodology at this point, I would say it's more of a reporting plan. I think when you're applying, you have to show us that this is feasible, that you have a clear path, although we are journalists like you and we understand if this path has to change, there's flexibility for this, but at least at this point having a clear path and showing that the story is feasible in terms of finding evidence and finding sources and planning for on the ground work as well as part of this. That's what we expect in this proposal, to show the relevance of the issue and how you're going to tackle it. If I may, Jessica, I also want to respond to this next one, which I think it's connected from Alexandra about what we envision in terms of collaboration between the fellows. So the collaboration between fellows really starts on day one when they're in the same group on this community by agreeing on sharing their story. So we have an agreement between fellows that everything is confidential. So you will feel comfortable of sharing your story idea and how you are thinking about tackling that challenge. And so the collaboration starts getting the feedback from us and the fellows. So the collaboration, it's ongoing in the sense that you're always going to have someone to talk with. You're always going to have like a group in Signal to ask for help on how to get this or that. You're always going to have the aspect of collaboration with our data team that's going to thinking about what kind of skills we can add or new trainings you can have. But on the specific stories, that's our role, as we were saying. Alexandra asked, is the Pulitzer Center, connecting the dots, helping us to look at the, connections between ideas? Yes, that's what we do. Is we see the opportunities for in between journalists of same countries or same region or even different regions to tackle the same issues. So we had, again, on the example of the rainforest, journalists covering palm oil in 3 different continents, and that was great. And ocean, I'm pretty certain that will allow us to think about these collaborations as well. How can we connect your project with the other fellows' project? And we won't force anyone to collaborate, but we think that we're going to be excited about the possibilities.
Gustavo, there's a lot of questions about publishing in other languages as well, and also publishing in local indigenous languages. And what the Pulitzer Center really wants to do is not just have the journalists report the story and then move on to the next thing. We really want to think about how there can be a level of engagement after that story, whether it's photo exhibitions or the journalist attending panels to talk about how they reported on the story, or reaching the community that they're reporting about through other languages. So Gustavo, could you just explain a bit about how the multiple languages might work?
Yeah, so there's no limitation in terms of what the language of the publication is. So we're never going to judge your project by that. On the application moment, if you have stories published in another language as examples of your work, you can share with us. We might ask some questions for you about a possible translation if we don't manage, but we do have this capacity of people who speak several languages in our staff, and we can count with them. But usually we try to publish a small snippet on our website about the story, if it's published in any language in English, to make sure that the story is visible for our audience that's mostly in English. But if the story is published in Spanish, Portuguese, we can, or Bahasa in Indonesia, we also can absorb some of those directly on our website. So there are some capacities for us to republish your stories in the original language, but what we actually do is just do like a summary in English to make sure that everybody see the story, but no restrictions at all on what language you're going to publish, originally going to publish. There's no requirement to publish in English or any other language.
There's a question about between the sea level rise story and marine plastic, which would which would we prefer? I mean, they're both really important topics. I guess what would sort of differentiate it is, what are you reporting that is new or systemic or underreported? You know, are you looking at sea level rise from a, I don't know, a financial perspective, or from an area that hasn't been reported? So like the example about Sierra Leone versus the Pacific Island states. And the marine plastic stuff, you know, are you looking into something that hasn't been reported on before? So yeah, I think the story really has to go deep, and it has to be, you know, not entirely new, but there has to be like, why are we reporting on this now, and what makes your story different that's from what's already out there?
We have a question here from a colleague of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and mentioning that I understand she works for a local media and it's afraid that cannot work with AP or CNN. So should she feel, you know, like invited to apply? Yes, of course. I mean, as we say, like, we're not looking for one specific outlet or region. Actually, the mix of outlets makes the diversity of this network very important. We have seen this in other initiatives, just having like a nice balance between like large newsrooms and local newsrooms allow us to think about collaboration and giving the right diversity for this initiative. So please apply.
And another thing, Gustavo, am I right in saying that if you're a journalist and you don't have a host publication, but you have what you think is a really good idea, you can feel free to email myself or Gustavo, and we can help you sort of connect that up as well, because we've got relationships with newsrooms. So often it's a case of piecing those things together. Is that right, Gustavo?
Yeah, we can help. And during the fellowship, we tend to help as well. And if you're working for a local newsroom, we tend to propose, like, can we think about another newsroom to publish, or like a translation of your story, if that's the case. So if you have a suggestion of a newsroom that you would like to work and don't have contacts, it's fine for sending us an email at this point, and we might help you with that.
There's a question about newsrooms which has come up a lot, I think, and we sort of put in the FAQs, is we don't just want newsrooms applying, it has to be from one person, and that can have the support of the newsroom, and often the training may be extended to other colleagues, but the application needs to come from just one individual journalist.
Exactly. And there's one quick question about if the funds can be used to pay photography and other visuals, the reporting expenses, those up to 10,000. Yes, the salary, of course, is for the fellow. So responding to this one is yes. Let me just.
There's one about the selection process. So yeah, that would be a process of interviewing and finding a bit more out about the plan. So we'll look through the applications and shortlist them, and then talk about them internally, and then there would be an interview process. Yeah.
So again, the timeline, the key dates are June 18, the due date for the applications. By the end of the month, June, beginning of July, we'll be doing the interviews. Hopefully by mid-July, we'll have the 8 fellows selected starting. A question about references, if they submit directly to us. What we're asking about references in the application form are the contact details. So what happens is we do a short list. We won't be contacting all the references straight away. You are free to have a letter and send. That's helpful for us, but it's what is happening most often is once we have the short list, we'll reach out to those contacts and ask for letters or even calls. We might call the references and just check.
I think maybe there's time to answer one more.
Yeah, if you're okay, I'm okay on staying 5 minutes more.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not sure I know the answers to all of these though. So
let me just check, because
I think we answered the top one by Jen, that we covered that already.
About the solution.
no, not all the stories will end up being collaborative, Jency. It may be that, you know, collaboration is like sharing tips or resources, or it may be two journalists teaming up together. But no, not everything needs to be collaborative. That's just a kind of benefit of being in the network. Gustavo, do you want to take the one about the money?
Yeah, the grants are disbursed monthly. They're not disbursed once. We had one or two agreements where people say, like, because of the taxes in my country, it will be easier to receive like every 2 months or 3 months, but we never had or will transfer all the resources at once. Even the grants, you know, like usually works either with one upfront payment because it involves trips, and then a final payment when the story is published.
I think the answer to Bianca's question about does everything have to be, you know, does everything have to stick to what's proposed in the application? No, because I don't think things work like that. So it will be flexible, but as long as it sort of follows what was generally originally proposed, I think that's fine, because things will change.
And the one about if you should, from Supriya, if you should mention the collaboration in the application, yes, please. If you have an idea of a collaboration, although we don't take applications from more than one person in the same project, it is to say that the fellow should be the point of contact and the main participant of the network. We do accept and like to see proposals that have a collaborative aspect. So if you have an idea that already involves other newsrooms and other journalists, please describe this in the application.
I'll take Emma's one. Hi, Emma. I think, yeah, if you've got an idea for a multimedia approach, but you're not sure who's going to do it, by all means apply and suggest that. And we can help you sort of find people if you need, you know, if you want to like work with a photographer or a video person. It's not going to, you know, exclude your application if you don't have a multimedia approach. But if you've got ideas, just include them.
There's one question from Sally about the salary and money. So Sally, about the salary, usually the amounts that we are getting are covering the entire salary of that journalist in the experience we had with the rainforest. Some cases are different from, you know, like major global newsrooms who have higher salaries, and we had to negotiate paying part of the salary because otherwise that would eat too much of our budget. So it's a negotiation, which we tend to be really fair and generous, as I was saying. But so it really is about us, once it's approved, to talk about with your editor, or if you're a freelance, if we're going to pay directly to the newsroom or if we're going to pay into your account. It's very flexible, and we'll try to do the best for the grantee and the newsroom.
But it is a full-time commitment. So the question is, like, can you get the Pulitzer salary plus your regular one? No. It's the idea is that maybe that money could go to pay for a cover reporter. If it takes you out of action, you get the Pulitzer salary, but it's not like something that can be fitted in around your current job.
Yeah. So just adding to that, that's a constant question that we get. Do we have to do full-time? What happens if this issue that I'm covering pops up or something? What we're saying is, like, this is a unique opportunity, you know, like to spend 1 year doing a special project, doing an investigation, really going in depth on this issue. And what we believe is that if the newsrooms is supporting this, that's the kind of newsroom that we need. You know, like if you, as a journalist, wanted to dedicate full time to this, this is what we're looking for. And for newsrooms that are small, it's like, well, if we miss this person, we're gonna have a huge gap. The idea is, like, we're covering 1 year of salary. Why not bring in another person to, you know, like cover this, what the work this person was doing. So it's all around the great opportunity and privilege of spending 1 year dedicating to an ocean story. So hopefully you and your editors will be attracted by that. And that, I think, respond to the other question about starting in later than mid-July. Unfortunately not. We really have to have the community working throughout the year together. we expect to have all fellows starting mid-July and finishing at the same time next year.
And the question about one topic, that's a good question, actually, because I don't know with the application form whether you can actually do more than one idea. But if you've got, I don't know, if you've got 2 ideas and you want to see what we think of them, then you should propose them. And, you know, if it doesn't work out for a fellowship, it might work out for an individual story grant for a one-off story. Or it might be that, you know, another story gets combined into something else. So yeah, I think if there's no obligation to stick to one topic, but I think, I don't know, if you've been working on something and really wanting to go deep in it for a while, I think you'd probably be pretty clear about what that topic is already, maybe.
Mm-hmm. The 2 further questions is one is about like reaching the newsroom after the deadline. Unfortunately not. We expect a letter of commitment of a newsroom, even if this is like, if the fellow gets approved, we'll willing to support it's his or her project. So we will need this this conversation between you and a potential newsroom before the application. And finally, there's a request from Jen to expand on the idea of mentioning other professionals contributing. That's related, Jen, with the feasibility of the project. If you make a proposal saying like, well, I'm going to do a series of like multimedia stories with photography, video, and you know, like interactive maps, the natural question for us is like, so do you have a team for doing this? Is the newsroom providing the resources for that? So I think it doesn't need to be extensive, but you can mention this on your distribution plan. I'm going to work with this newsroom because they will support me with, you know, like with their data team and their, you know, like fact checking team. So these elements help us to decide how doable is the project. And if there's any aspect that it's also beyond the newsroom, like I'm going to contribute, collaborate with this team of scientists that are going to do like the data analysis for me and provide this unique data set that I'm going to deep dive and create a journalistic story. That's an aspect that is also interesting for us, you know. So the distribution includes the newsroom work, but also how you're going to think about reaching audiences and bringing more capacity to your work. So everything that you know is going to happen or you want to happen, describe it. It's going to help us to decide.
Well, I think we've answered all the questions, but if you have any more, feel free to email myself or Gustavo. I think our name is on the application page and I've just shared it on there. So yeah, if there's any further questions, please do get in touch and we'll help however we can.
Last question is if we can publish in different outlets. Sure. More the merrier. Thank you. Thank you so much. We were so glad and so inspired by the number of people that just show up here. It shows us we have a great interest to this important issue. Again, yeah. Happy World Ocean Day. Thanks, Jessica, so much.
Okay, thanks everyone, and happy World Ocean Day.
Yeah, and we'll make this recording available in our page as well.